They say suburban streets are safe. It's where most people want to live, raise a family, own a home. Some say that safety is just an illusion. And once darkness falls, it's hard to know what might be lurking in the shadows. Tonight, we bring you 4 suburban horror stories that will keep you up tonight. All of these stories come from our community. So let's jump right in with story No. 1. The Lost Dog Caller. It was 3 a.m., and I was getting a call from an unknown number. That's when I started babysitting for families in our suburb. Most of the families I worked for were really nice, which was a great relief for a new babysitter like me. But one particular family stood out. However, that solitude was shattered one night when I was awoken by someone knocking on my back door. I checked the cameras, and everything was fine. I assumed it was my neighbor, who I knew was remodeling his house. One night I had to make a delivery at 2 a.m. I arrived at the customer's house and rang the doorbell. No answer. So I put the pizza down and knocked. Still no answer. I knocked again, but when I turned around, I saw a pair of feet running away. I shrugged it off and walked to the door. When I opened it, I could see the pizza was gone. That's when I heard a whisper, "Thank you." I jumped and turned around, but no one was there. I closed the door and walked to my car. On my way, I checked my phone and saw that I had received a text message. It read, "Thank you," and the timestamp said 4 hours earlier. Each night I would hear different sounds, footsteps, banging, drilling. But this noise was different. It was the sound of knocking on my back door. I checked the locks, and they were all secure. If you enjoyed these suburban horrors, subscribe for more chilling tales. Thank you for listening to this episode of the 3 a.m. Files. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe for more terrifying tales. Also, be sure to check out our podcast available on various platforms. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. I went to bed assuming that it was just my imagination. But the next night it happened again, the same sound, the sound of someone knocking on my door. I got up and checked the logs on my security system, and it showed nothing. There was no one on my porch. This continued every single night. I checked my timeline again, and it always said the same thing. Motion detected at back door at 2:34 a.m. I decided to set up a camera to catch whatever or whoever was doing this, and that's when I saw the most terrifying thing. I saw a pale hand that was not attached to any body knocking on my back door. It knocked 3 times and then disappeared. I have since moved away, but every time I hear a knock in the middle of the night, I think of that pale hand. The parents of the kid I was watching that night left for a party and told me to lock the doors and windows and not to open them for anyone. That's when things got weird. I was sitting in the living room with the kids when they started asking me, "Who's out there?" They pointed down the long hallway and said, "That man is watching me." I checked down the hallway and saw nothing but an empty coat rack. "There's no one there," I said, trying to sound reassuring. But as soon as I turned away, I heard the kid say, "He's there now." I turned back around and checked again, but still saw nothing. Then I heard the screen door slam shut, ran to the window, and saw that the door had not been open a moment ago. I told myself that I must have misheard, and just as I turned to go back to the living room, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw a photo of me standing outside the window. I looked over and saw my husband sleeping peacefully beside me. "I don't have any dogs." I was confused, but I picked up the phone. On the other end of the line, I could hear heavy breathing. "Your dog is right outside." I hung up, thinking it was some kind of joke. But then I started hearing what sounded like a small dog barking outside our home. I called back the number, but it had been disconnected. My husband and I listened intently, straining to hear anything over the wind. And that's when we heard it again, a small bark. Then I heard what sounded like footsteps near our front door. They were slow and deliberate. I looked over at my husband, who was now awake and staring at the front door. Who could be out there? We both wondered aloud. My husband went to check the door, while I listened intently. All of a sudden, I heard the distinct sound of keys messing in our front door lock. I screamed, and my husband came rushing back to the bedroom. We turned off all of the lights and huddled together under the covers. That's when we started hearing what sounded like a small cat yowling in our yard. My husband and I watched in horror as the front door handle began to shake violently. Then, just as suddenly, everything went silent. The only sound was the heavy breathing coming from our phones. We both looked at each other in terror before hanging up. And to this day, we still wonder who was on the other end of that call. Was it a lost dog trying to get back inside, or something more sinister? I was awoken in the middle of the night by my phone. Story no. 2. The babysitter's shadow. I was a college student home for the summer and needed some extra cash. Story no. 3. The neighbor's knock. I live in a small suburb, and I love the quiet solitude. Story no. For the midnight delivery. I was working as a pizza delivery driver during college, and now for the outro. These weren't monsters hiding in dark forests or abandoned houses. They lived next door in homes much like ours.